Tell us about what you're doing now. You've started a nonprofit and you have a very specific goal and philosophy in mind.
The campaign for going to Europe was called We Carry Kevan. The idea behind that was that it wasn't just me going or just a couple friends, but everyone we knew was involved. Kind of continue that philosophy of redefining accessibility. So the message is for the disabled community as well as able-bodied. We need each other to make it happen. If we are creative and courageous enough to give it a try, then the world becomes accessible.
This is Kevan Chandler, and he grew up in the foothills of North Carolina with his parents and 2 siblings. The youngest of the bunch, he was the second to be diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, a rare neuromuscular disease. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Counseling from John Wesley College. With this degree, he has served in prison ministries around the Southeast United States. In the summer of 2016, Kevan and his friends took a trip across Europe in which they left his wheelchair at home and his friends carried him for 3 weeks in a backpack. An avid storyteller, Kevan is the author of 5 books, including a memoir of the trip entitled The View from Here. And he speaks worldwide about his unique life with a disability. He is also the founder of We Carry Kevan, a non-profit striving to redefine accessibility as a cooperative effort. And we didn't know each other very well, but I tell you, he's a brother to us. We love you, Kevan. We love your family. We're so glad you're here.
Wow, thank you for having me, for the invitation to be part of this conversation this weekend on the pro-life issues in Canada and the world around us, the whole world, because it is an issue going on, and the whole subject is actually really near and dear to my heart, and it will make more sense if I introduce a very special guest, which is my mom. I didn't tell her I was going to do this, but can you just wave or something? So yeah, I figured who better to bring to a pro-life conference than the lady that gave birth to me, right? That just made sense. And she and my dad instilled in our family a home that was not just pro-life, but we, as the title of the weekend, we cherish life. We value life so highly, and part of that was the work that she did for my life. I've been around for 33 years, and up to now she has been the director of 3 different crisis pregnancy centers, 2 of which she actually started, and those 2 that she started were within spitting distance of abortion clinics. So she, in this battle of ours, she's been on the front lines, and you do not mess with my mom. So, and so that had a lot to do with it. My siblings and I joke that we grew up in the kitchen of a crisis pregnancy center, and we got to see lives changed and lives saved through this experience. But also, she and my dad instilled this in us by teaching us through the Word, introducing us to Jesus and showing us how much He valued life, right? But on top of all of that, on top of her work and how they taught us through scripture and through words. They also taught us just by the example of everyday in and out small decisions, of putting people first and valuing the lives of those around them and fighting for others' lives. And also in our own family and their decisions for our family. As it was mentioned, I'm the youngest of three and the second to be diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, that being more easily referred to as SMA, so I'll do that from now on. But my brother came first, and he came out perfectly fine and normal, and well, he's an artist, so I'll let you decide from there. But no, he's brilliant and able-bodied and perfectly healthy kid. And my sister came along, and it looked like it would be the same thing. And she was a cute kid. She was, as it's been told to me, and I've seen the photos. She was lovable. Everyone wanted to hold her and carry her around. There's as the story goes, one of my grandmothers, who was a proper British woman, would wrap her up in hand-knitted blankets and rock her in the corner while singing hymns quietly. And then it came time for my other grandma to hold her, and she was a little fireball from Florida, and she would strip her down to her diaper and parade her around to show her off to anyone who would give her attention. And everyone in between wanted to cuddle her and hold her and love on her. And then it came time for her to be a toddler, and so she would hold on to the couch and the table and dad's hand or mom's skirt. But that only lasts so long, and she got to the point where she should be letting go of things. But the problem was that she didn't. And so she wouldn't let go of dad's hand or mom's skirt, and she couldn't let go of the toy shopping cart that they had without falling down. And so this led to taking her to the doctor, and that led to several months of muscle biopsies and blood tests and flying her around the country to see what was going on. Because this was the mid-'80s, and there wasn't that much known about SMA at the time. But finally, my parents were taken into an office full of doctors and research specialists, and they told them the diagnosis. And they said she has spinal muscular atrophy, which means that the message from her brain to her spinal cord that tells her muscles what to do doesn't really work that well. It gets messed up on the way, and so her muscles will atrophy over time, and this will affect not just her arms and legs, but it'll affect her neck and her respiratory system and her digestive and immune systems. It'll affect her voice. It'll affect her smile. She'll be in and out of hospitals. She'll spend most of her life in a wheelchair. And it's going to be a hard life. And they went on to say, we suggest, and I think they meant well by this. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Because it was going to be a hard life. And if you hear a list of things like that, it makes sense that one child with that disability is going to be enough. And you know, when Andrew came along, it was perfectly fine, and he was healthy. And but when Connie was diagnosed, that changed the ratio entirely. So if they were to have another child, they would probably be diagnosed with the same disease. And so the doctor said, we suggest that you not have any more children because this life is going to be hard. And my dad, who is a mechanic and a deacon, he's quiet, but he's a man of action, and he's strong, took my mom's hand and said, if what you're saying is that the worst that can happen is we have another child like Connie, that's perfectly fine with us. And I showed up like a year later. So I'm really thankful for that decision, that moment of saying, no, we're going to trust God with this. If he decides we have enough kids, then we have enough kids, but we'll just see what happens. And so I showed up, and I asked my mom when I was writing my book, I said, what was my story of being diagnosed? Like, was it, when you hear this big dramatic experience like Connie had? She said, no, we were at Grandma's house and you started falling down the same way, and so we took you to the doctor and you said, yep, that's what it is. And we just kind of kept going with life. And I think that's a testimony too, that there wasn't this long period of mourning or figuring out what we were doing. It was okay. This is our life, and we're going to keep going. Things may look different, but we're still gonna live as normal a life as possible, and our kids are gonna know that we love them, and that's what matters. And the thing is, the doctors were right. They said that I would probably have SMA, and I did. And they said that it would be a hard life, and it has been. I went from sword fighting with my brother in the yard to dropping my silverware at dinner, not to get attention all the time. But I went from playing soccer with my friends to having to leave school early because I couldn't hold my head up. When I was 10, I had an ulcer in my stomach that broke, and all the doctors in the room are like, that's not a good idea. But this ulcer broke, and it didn't look like I was gonna come out the other side. A couple of years ago, my sister was in the hospital for pneumonia, which was nothing new, and I really felt at that time that I had to prepare myself to potentially say goodbye, which also wasn't anything new. So life has been hard. But let me tell you what the doctors did not foresee. They did not foresee a dad building a go-kart in the driveway with his sons. They did not foresee a mom baking 8 dozen Christmas cookies because her kids were going to invite all of their friends over to decorate them, not realizing that she doesn't normally make that many, but she's going to have cookies for everyone. They didn't foresee that my sister would go on to have a bachelor's in child psychology and a master's in teaching ESL, and now works with refugees from all over the world that come to Carolina to help them settle in and learn the language and learn how things work. She gets to pour into the lives of so many people from, was it 50 different countries? Without having to go there. They didn't foresee that I would play in a really dumb punk band in high school, and in college we would tour the southeast of the United States, just me and my 2 weird friends that had no idea how to take care of me, but we figured it out. No formal training, no nursing or anything. They they didn't foresee that 3 years ago, as Jackie mentioned, my friends and I decided that we were going to go to Europe and that it was not going to be wheelchair accessible, the things that we wanted to do. We wanted to visit Paris, which is not accessible. We wanted to experience the English countryside. We wanted to hike an island in the middle or off the coast of Ireland. None of this was going to work for my wheelchair, which didn't mean that I couldn't go. It just meant my wheelchair couldn't go. So it was not invited. We left it home and we designed this backpack, and my friends took turns carrying me for 3 weeks as we danced through the streets of Paris and climbed this island called Skellig Michael. And there's a monastery at the top from the 6th century, which you can only get to by climbing 600 steps that are about that old. Also, if you've seen Star Wars, it shows up there. But side note. But there's one story from there that I wanted to share, which is that the day that we went out for a walk around the English countryside, which turned out to be more of a hike, a 6-mile hike, that none of us really planned on, but our guide said, no, it'll be great, it'll be easy, not thinking about the 75 pounds on these guys' backs. They took turns, and he even pitched in. But it was a whole day of doing a big loop through the countryside. We started in Westerham, which is a small town about an hour south of London, and went out and hopped fences and walked through fields where cattle were laying around, and got to feel the grass up to our knees, and walked through ancient forest, which we don't have in America, and then we got to see Winston Churchill's home. We did all these amazing things, and near the end of the hike, we came over a hill, and as we crested it, you could see Westerham ahead of us down the hill, and the more hills behind it, the mountains there, and we looked around, and my friend Tom said, this is a good spot. I didn't really realize what he was saying, but what he was referring to was my desire that I had shared with him months before to be out in the middle of nowhere. I had said if I could physically do it myself, I would run out into the middle of a field and just stand there. Just me and God, with the sky above and the ground below, and no hindrances, no distractions, just us. And so he looked around, and it seemed like everything added up, and so he said, this is a good spot. And he and the guys took me off of his back and set me on the ground and left me. Which was terrifying at first, but he was like, no, this is what you've always wanted, so take in the moment. And so they left. I actually don't know for how long, because I have no concept of time. And so might have been 10 minutes, might have been an hour, I don't know. But as I sat there, looking out over the countryside, realizing that this is exactly what I wanted, and I was part of nature. And most importantly, I was somewhere that I could never in my life be without these guys, without their help to physically carry me to that point and set me down and care about me that much, to have that kind of sacrificial love. Was just profound to me. The doctors never saw that coming. They did not foresee that. My favorite that the doctors did not see coming was when I was 6 years old, and I was sitting on my parents' bed, and my dad introduced me to Jesus. Because in that moment, I met my Creator. And ever since then, he has been my source of joy and hope and peace. And that makes life worth living, right? And he's my best friend and my king all at the same time, and my savior. And so, despite all the hard things of life, and the big moments and the small moments, the exciting moments and the really bad moments, he's always there with me. And so it makes life worth living. And I remember after college, I was visiting every Friday a prison, a men's facility. I would go in the morning and just go to chapel with them. I never spoke at the chapel that I remember. I just had gotten to know the guys through volunteering, and this was a time during the week where there weren't a bunch of other volunteers. It was just, I could just go and be with them. And so one of my favorite memories with them is that I was sitting in the back, and it was a room a little smaller than this bottom part here. And sorry guys in the back, but and there were wooden pews lining the room and carpet that made it obvious that no one had updated it since the 1970s. And in this room, there were probably 40 or so guys, all convicted criminals for every reason imaginable. And because of that, they had been separated from their friends and families, separated from the world, the community outside. They understood what the separation of sin means, that because of their sin, they were here. And they felt the weight of that. And I sat in that room with these men, all standing, every ethnicity possible, filling this room with song. And they were singing, holding their hands up, clutching their chest, their eyes closed, singing, because he lives, I can face tomorrow. And because he lives, all fear is gone. And I know he holds the future. And this is the line that has always stuck with me. And life is worth the living just because he lives. And it's honestly one of my favorite memories of life, because it's so clear of the power of Jesus and the Holy Spirit working in people's hearts, is to realize that. Because Jesus died for us to have life abundantly. I was thinking this week about, I was reading in Acts where Peter and John are preaching to the crowd, and Peter refers to Jesus as the author of life. And then not long after that, maybe a few years, but I like to imagine that he went home and wrote some notes down. But a little later, John wrote a letter to the church, and he referred to Jesus as the giver of all good things. And they're talking about the same person, the author of life and the giver of all good things, which means life is a good thing, right? And Jesus provides that. And so that's what I hold on to, and that's what brings value to our lives. And it's what brings value to the lives of these women that you guys serve, that we serve. It's what brings value to the men in their lives, and it's what brings value to the children, to the babies. In closing, I'll wrap this up because it's getting late. I mentioned Mom's work with the crisis pregnancy centers, and one of my favorite stories is that early on, we were living in South Florida, and she and a friend had started this center in Fort Lauderdale. It was the first one in Fort Lauderdale, and around that time there was a big pro-life conference nearby, and there was this buzz that this new center had opened and that it was right there by an abortion clinic. And so that Saturday, all these people from the conference showed up. And I think they had to shut the clinic down that day, right? The abortion clinic, because people just couldn't get in and out. And so they had to shut it down, and there was this victory, there was celebration for a day of success. And my mom, again, you don't mess with my mom. She found a megaphone, don't ask me where, and climbed up on a van and got everyone's attention. And she said something to the tune of, "We're so glad that you're here. This is exciting, but this is Saturday, and on Monday everything starts again. And so we need you to come back. We need you to volunteer at our center. We need you to be present. We need you to invest your time and your heart into these women, because it's one thing to get caught up in the excitement of the thrill of this rally on one morning, but what about the rest of the time?" And so I look around the room, and I know that all of you are involved deeply in what's going on. You're involved in this movement. Most of you are drivers of the movement, and so I want to encourage you in that, and I want to remind you that it is a day in and day out decision, and it's a choice day in and day out to love these people that you come in contact with and to invest in them, because at the end of the day, life is worth the living because he lives. Thanks, guys.